Welcome to this lecture entitled Realism on War and Peace. Here, what I'm aimed to show is how the realist school of thought, which is the dominant school on global politics, informing policy practices, state behavior, and international diplomacy, how it is that realism understands or takes up categories of war and peace. And what I also aim to show here is that as the dominant mode of theorizing global politics and by implication informing policy practices, realism is bent on foregrounding a type of knowledge production and knowledge dissemination that tells us everything about war as a matter of practice and almost nothing substantive about how to achieve a lasting global peace. In other words, realism promotes war, indeed glorifies war, to the detriment of peace. So what I aim to show, in a sense, is how realism enables a kind of a war-prone understanding of politics wherein war is conceived as the subject and object of analysis vis-à-vis peace. That kind of an argument. And I want to show you with specific examples how this is the case. Realism is informed by certain chief assumptions. Nearly all realists, as any other approach to global politics or theoretical understanding of global politics, we're not talking about a singular camp. There are many different phases of realism. But nearly all of them are grounding their assumption on certain arguments, if you wish. And all of which starts with the Hobbesian understanding of state of nature. So politics, life, global relations are all understood vis-a-vis the category of state of nature, or what Hobbes called state of nature. That condition of a war of everyone against everybody else, wherein, according to Hobbes, life is brutish, nasty, and short. So they take that assumption as given, hence what you see on the board here, Hans Morgenthau, one of the chief architects of contemporary realism, speaking about politics, that international politics, like society in general, he wrote in his seminal work, that international society, like politics in general, or politics like society in general, is based on objective laws that have roots in human nature. That's the starting point. Objective laws that have roots in human nature. Some weeks ago, I spoke about how Hobbes conceived this objective knowledge about state of nature, having lived through the English Civil War and the 30 Years' War, compel him to come up with a historically contingent ontology of human beings and its environment. Again, ontology, by that we mean nature of being, a historically ontology conception of human beings and its environment, wherein life is nasty, short, and brutish. And we know that knowledge, what he calls science, is based on objectivism, sense, and memory, the product of what the researcher feels, senses, and sees. As when, quoting him, when we see a fact doing or remember it done, he wrote in his seminal Leviathan. And so that understanding of state of nature is taken up by realists. It is not only a pessimistic understanding of human nature and our environment, who we are and our environment. It is also a miserable knowledge construct. A miserable knowledge construct in the sense that it promotes the view that every man is every man's enemy. And because every man is every man's enemy, after the killing of that first enemy, that man is again in the like danger of another enemy. It is in that insidious perpetual cycle in which humanity is born and lives their life. And here I always have to intervene and assure you that I conceived no one here as my enemy, just to show you how limited this knowledge construct is. Unless I am proven otherwise, of course. But here is another counter knowledge to this type of a knowledge that has been taken up as the true understanding of human and state relations for eternity. So that's one, that understanding of human nature is shared, the Hobbesian state of nature is shared by all realists to the extent that the epithet Hobbesian is used commonly to reference the structure of international relations. And you see this argument surfacing itself later down the road when I expound how realists understand categories of war and peace. Next to the concept of state of nature is this category that we call statism. Statism is taken up by realists. It is understood in several ways. On one level, we can understand statism as a doctrine, if you wish. A doctrine that tells us that state is the primary unit, not just for understanding global politics, but for understanding life. And so we call it a doctrine because it privileges the category of state over international organizations and even human beings. Doesn't matter if the human beings are collateral damage here. It is about what is called the health and strength of the state, the very raison d'etre, reason of state. But statism is also understood as an ism, as an ideology that takes up the Hobbesian notion of sovereignty as the building block of international relations. And with that comes a nation-centric understanding of the world, wherein the people of the globe are grouped into distinctly separated nations. So nationalism and statism and state sovereignty go hand in hand in the sense that when you reference nationalism, what you have in mind is the sovereignty of the particular units, in this case, states. The sovereignty of the particular units, in this case, state, and then nationalism or nation. The idea of nation becomes an ism because you're talking here about the exaltation of one privileged nation over all others. And so it's an exclusionary maxim because it taps into perniciously constructed prejudices that enables binary divisions, massive binary divisions between who we are as a nation and who we are not. Massive binary divisions that enable the distinction between fatherland/motherland and the foreign land and strange land, inside races versus outside races, inside ethnicities, religions versus outside ones. By tapping into humanity's politics of identity, by creating these perniciously constructed prejudices, we are also tapping into politics of difference. It's never about unity or diversity, or as the case may be, unity in diversity. It is all about difference, the grouping of humankind into various nations who end up feeling themselves different than each other. It is these prejudices that continue to shake the limbs of humanity. And so long as they exist, so shall war, misery, and conflict. In this sense, nationalism has become a kind of a force amplifier that has sanctioned states to extract significant resources from their territories as well as manpower in order to wage total wars with each other. Total war is a kind of a war that is about political existence is at stake here when you speak about total wars. It is that pernicious idea that informs this thing that we call statism. With statism also comes the idea of anarchy, which is another perniciously constructed idea, if you ask me. It begins with the assumption that the category or norm of sovereignty can only be applied to state relations, what we reference as anarchy. Above the level that is the state, that is to say in international politics, there exists a condition of anarchy, and by anarchy we simply mean absence of a higher authority, absence of a global sovereign that can coordinate state relations or even mitigate wars among them. So it's a jungle-like environment, and we have decided that this condition of anarchy cannot be transcended. And part of the reason that we have decided as such perhaps has to do with the knowledge impoverishment that underpins international relations studies, in particular realism. We have been able to land on the moon, transform mere atoms to agents of immense destruction, travel faster than the speed of sound. But we have not been able to come up with a political penicillin to remedy the condition of anarchy, a condition that we ourselves have created, as evinced by the Treaty of Westphalia and the birth of the modern state. So state, therefore we say, and you have Kenneth Waltz here. And herein I want to go over the work of several leading lights of realism, and the more contemporary ones. Kenneth Waltz, one of them, Hans Morgenthau, another, and John Mearsheimer, in order to understand how categories of war and peace have been construed here. Kenneth Waltz, the realist theorist who has given arguably the most systematic attention to the puzzle of warfare, speaks about it. States in the world are like individuals in the state of nature. States in the world are like individuals in the state of nature. And then he concludes, they're never controlled by law. So the principle of anarchy cannot be transcended to the international system or at the international level. At that level, there is a condition of a perpetual war of everyone against everybody else. He calls it, Kenneth Waltz, international state of nature. I come back to the actual quote later. International state of nature. So anarchy in this sense becomes the fundamental fact of international relations. Robert Jervis, for example, speaks about it, and Robert Art. Anarchy as the fundamental fact of international relations. You see, they're all commenting on this. John Mearsheimer, speaking about anarchy too. In the anarchic world of international relations, he wrote, it is best to be Godzilla than Bambi. In the anarchic world of international relations, it's best to be Godzilla than Bambi, he wrote. In order for you to understand how global politics is reduced to a Disney-like enterprise or a cartoon-like enterprise, you have to understand how the realists understand the category of politics in relation to science itself. Hans Morgenthau, politics is an art and not a science. Just like that. Politics is an art and not a science. It is that kind of observation that gives them the green light to conceive international relations as a battleground between Godzilla and Bambi. Such knowledge fundamentalism, at war with science, linguistically repressive, epistemically resistant to change, intellectually unsound, theoretically war-prone, violently masculine, and irrevocably opposed to the cause of global peace, really, is then sanctioned by the concept of power, which is understood as this category, as this concept that is unrelenting, brutal, and corrupt in its scope and capacity. In the realist school of thought, power is understood as a biological category, a biological imperative that is all about a universal urge to survive. It is the greatest commodity you can have in international relations, or for the state to have in international relations when they speak about power. Mearsheimer and Morgenthau speak about it as the ultimate aim of international politics, in that you get the sense that international relations is reduced to a struggle for power and nothing else. And also the immediate aim of international politics when you speak about power. Power is never given to you in this theoretical order of things. It must be acquired, actively pursued. You must go after acquiring power because nobody gives it to you. It's a kind of relational entity. You always have to gauge to gain it in relation to other counterparts, that is to say, in relation to other states. It is not or never readily available to you as such. And so in this, because power is elevated as the immediate aim of international politics, power in and of itself becomes about survival. Why? Because there is a jungle-like condition of anarchy that we have conceived to say, or we have conceived to be non-transcendental. It cannot be transcended. We have decidedly decided for that point. But at this juncture in history, it is inevitable that we need something like a global sovereign. If you're really serious about, or if we have the political will to mitigate warfare, that would come about, I am almost convinced, out of either global deliberation or a global-like, or I should say another global-like catastrophe. But that power is about survival, has everything to do with that you need to have, in a condition of anarchy, of course, you need to gain a position of dominant power over all other states. Again, because states are the building unit. So the focus is on the state. You need to develop a position, or you need to gain a position of dominant power over all other states, because having dominant power ensures survival. Your first task is to survive. For otherwise, what good is prosperity? What good is development if you cannot survive in an anarchical international environment? In anarchy, survival becomes the key. And the key to gaining it is power, having a dominant position of power relative to your counterparts in relation to other states. And so here, another principle is exalted, and that is a condition that is called self-help. The international system is predicated upon the principle of self-help. Why? Because in anarchy, there is always uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen to you down the road. You don't know who will be allying against you down the road in a condition of anarchy. And so international system is conceived as a perpetual domain that is replete with uncertainty, really. And so here, and Mersheimer has written about it, states must remain vigilant, he wrote. States must remain vigilant and never subordinate survival to any other goal, and I'm quoting him, including prosperity. Like that states must remain vigilant and never subordinate survival to any other goal, including prosperity. I mean, so far as this pernicious knowledge relation informs global practices, look no further than how North Korea is conducting itself. The population is starving. But the North Korean state is increasing the awesome might of its nuclear arsenals on a continuous basis. All we need to do is to resort back to Mersheimer's quote that states must remain vigilant and never subordinate survival to any other goal, including prosperity. Forget about the prosperity of your nation. Will have become collateral damage in this case. Survival is the key, and the key to survive is your military might. And so a self-help mentality, according to Kenneth Waltz, they're all pitching in here on this notion of self-help. A self-help mentality dominates, or should, or must dominate, because those who do not help themselves end up suffering. And by suffering, he means cease to exist. And so how do you help yourself here? How do states help themselves? The key concept here is security. To the point that because the category of the state is exalted as the main unit in international relations studies, state interest, national interest, and the idea of self-interest become much the same thing. That in order to survive, you need to acquire power. And perhaps here I should add, the military power is understood as the most important power resource in global politics. The most important power resource in global politics. It's about counting guns, is what it is. That's how war-prone the understanding is. That if you want to become more secure, you have to manufacture more guns, because military power is the most important power resource in global politics that can ensure your survival, if no other reason. So that's how you can help yourself. And so in anarchy, so goes the argument, security becomes the highest end here. So in this sense, a militarized national security paradigm would ensue here. That is, or perpetuates a global arms race. Look no further than how much the United States spent on its military just this past year in 2023. Mind-boggling $916 billion. To understand how these ideas literally inform policy practices, how these pernicious ideas inform warmongering understanding of global politics. And so we come back again to the point. It's a recycling of power here, glorifying power as this thing that merely dominates and exploits. It never produces. It never does anything useful. It just destructs. That's the kind of power that we have come up with and theorized and exported to policy practices. You see? So states must gain a position of dominant power because having dominant power ensures survival. Mearsheimer speaking here. States must gain a position of dominant power. It is the global arms race, literally and practically, because having dominant power ensures survival. So, therefore, with the self-help mentality, and we're now getting close to the question of warfare here, with the self-help mentality, predicated upon the relentless pursuit of maximizing power in order to survive, creates a perpetual condition, or I should say another perpetual condition. Anarchy is one, but here is another one. And it is called security dilemma. It is called the dilemma, it is important to point out, because it can never be solved or resolved. Hence why we call it dilemma. It's perpetual under the status quo in international relations, of course. The security dilemma. You need to remember these two injunctions, that military power is the most significant power resource in politics, and that states must gain a position of dominant power over all others, because having dominant power ensures survival. Now, a security dilemma kicks in, because the self-help mentality predicated upon the condition of uncertainty leads to maximization or increase in your power as a state. You must do everything you can to have leverage over all others. And that leverage, again, is counted in the number of guns you have. But instead of bringing about a more secure world, you see the increasing insecurity of global security, because it leads to a security dilemma here, where we're talking about a dead-end situation in security dilemma, where the actions taken by a state to increase its security leads to the insecurity of one or several other states, which in turn decreases their level of security globally. So because, let's focus on global's arms race, military power, this manifestation of power politics in international relations. Let's focus on that. Because military power is the most significant power resource in global politics, and because the logic goes, you need to gain a position of dominant power over all others. The original state, what does it do? I need to increase my security in order to survive. How would I do that? I would take up my military might up a notch. Now, one or several other states are looking and they feel insecure here because more guns are required here and they need to do the same thing, but they cannot just match it because the logic is about gaining a position of dominant power. We can take it up a notch. Now the original state feels even more insecure and does the same thing, and the same thing, and the same thing. We literally have some insecure personalities in states. When you're insecure, you're controlling. When you're insecure, you're compulsive. When you're insecure, you're obsessive. When you're insecure, you're obsessively compulsive. You lack confidence. You look for trouble. You're prone to conflict. And now we enter this domain that is called political psychology. And I say we have some deeply insecure personalities in states. Herein lies a receipt for catastrophe. Because war becomes, and we finally get to the point of warfare, because here war becomes an undeniable and recurring feature of global politics. Kenneth Waltz writes about it. The security dilemma continues, and warfare comes into play because there are miscalculations. And so warfare in this sense becomes a recurring aspect of global politics. A kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, really. You know? And now how warfare is understood here, theorized, and turned into a matter of policy. Let's go over the rhetoric. In particular, Kenneth Waltz, and here, John Mearsheimer. It starts with recycling the Hobbesian notion of state of nature and who we are as human beings. Conflict-prone, nasty, brutish, self-interested, you know. It is as if this is all that defines us. There is no hope about us, that kind of a mentality. That there is no possibility of improvement, the understanding of the past, present, and future in much the same light. That's all you get here. But starts with the point that states in the world are like individuals in the state of nature. Conflict-prone, nasty, brutish, which really is all about the condition of a war of everyone against everybody else. And so Waltz continued, therefore the locus of the important causes of war is found in the nature and behavior of men. And because human beings and states are likened as much the same entity, whatever characteristics we exhibit in being self-interested, nasty, and brutish is also exhibited by the state. So goes the argument, you know, that kind of an idea. And so the crux of the matter has to do with who the states are. It's just they're that way. And there is nothing you can do about it. And so now you get to an explanation of warfare with many sovereign states, with no enforceable laws among them, Kenneth Waltz wrote in his seminal Man, State, and War. Conflict leading to war is just bound to occur. In a condition of anarchy, war is a normalized activity. And so here, there is a Nostradamus-like kind of prophecy that is given to you in Mearsheimer here, that the cycle of violence will continue into the new millennium, and hope for peace and prosperity will probably not be realized, he wrote. You know, that kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is like you're wearing a gloomy-like lens about the world, and this is how you see it. How can you see it any other differently? You see? And so what I'm trying to suggest here is that there is a mode of knowledge fundamentalism embedded in this school of thought. A kind of knowledge fundamentalism that exalts warfare as the chief object and subject of analysis and policy practice vis-à-vis peace. What I'm trying to say is that there is a kind of knowledge domination embedded in the school of thought that is about coercing us to submit to the timeless conditionality of war. And in order to understand this, I want to give you a linguistic interpretation of how war-peace relationship is articulated in Kenneth Waltz's seminal work, Man, State, and War. Man, State, and War. How he linguistically orders war and peace relationship. In this case, by exalting war to the detriment of a lasting global peace. And he starts with the axiom that war and the threat of war, he wrote in his seminal work, Man, State, and War. War and the threat of war stimulate speculation upon the condition of peace. War and the threat of war stimulate speculation upon the condition of peace. Linguistically, ordering warfare in this way or pattern ensures that rather than peace, it is war that is conceived. And I want you to be here with me. Rather than peace, it is war that is conceived as that which can promote the internal unity of the state. It is mind-boggling how unity and war are associated with each other here. Hence, his words. War and the threat of war stimulate speculation upon the condition of peace, leading to the fact that war promotes the internal unity of each state. Peace is excluded here, but what is much more mind-boggling here is that war and unity are associated with one another. An observer once wrote, the well-being of humankind, its peace and security, cannot be achieved until and unless its unity is firmly established. But it seems like here we're getting a distorted version of reality, that somehow war is related to unity. This means that only after war is conceived as the overarching truth about the conditionality of human beings, only after war is understood as a timeless condition of human beings and our environment, only after its practice as a matter of state policy is conceived to be natural, normal, and habitual, we can only then say that here it is in war there is no victory but only various degrees of defeat. Only then Kenneth Waltz tells us that the real interests of all people are furthered by peace rather than war. And you see the contradictions here. If in war there is no victory but only various degrees of defeat, then how can it lead to the internal unity of the state? The manifest discourse in international politics, therefore, is really no more than the repressive presence of what it does not say, in this case about condemnation of war. And this not said is a hollow that undermines from within all that is said about peace. And once war is conceived as the truth of reality, a perpetual condition of human beings and its environment, its knowledge normalized as a habitual and practice. The project of theorizing in international relations studies really comes to an end, in which, or by which I mean there are no more empirically substantive statements, evidence, or knowledge relations that might question it. The will to knowledge is suppressed here, in that all we can say is just to confirm to the timeless conditionality of war. Hence Kenneth Waltz's axiom that international politics is a realm in which anything goes. His words. So there is international politics is a realm in which anything goes. Search for no more things. And there is an ending in the theoretical order of war-peace relationship in international relations at this point. All we can imagine, postulates Stanley Hoffman, are really oases of real peace. The time must come, I have no doubt. The time must come when those who preach the dogma, the false god of realism, will be held into account for their political, moral, and intellectual stewardship. The contribution of their theorists to the cause of global peace is the normalization of a perpetual arms race baptized as a means of human salvation. Their incense, the anguish of war-torn nations. Their incantations, a timeless message of war accompanied by worn-out, insidious axioms. Their sacrifice, the endless desolation of mothers and fathers whose offspring never returned from the battlefield. They venerate the nation and deify the state, and so doing so exalt both above humanity. Very disenchanted and agonized, a harassed humanity looks on as Hobbesian institutions plunge the world deeper into a state of anxiety. We are right at the end of the lecture, everyone. And the floor is open. I understand that some of you have questions. So please.